Next, we're going to hit the next section of covering growth and start talking about nutrient requirements for growth and how they change and how we can manipulate our feeding to support optimal growth. There's numerous factors used to calculate the growth requirements. First and foremost, we have to consider maintenance because the animal's first priority is just to maintain its body. All animals have that maintenance requirement, and that maintenance requirement is usually greater than the growth requirement. So we've got to meet maintenance needs first before we can even think about asking our animals to grow and develop. Body weight is also another factor that's used to calculate growth requirements. This can be used to kind of help reflect that gain of new tissue. How are they changing in their body weight? And it's also going to affect their composition of gain as well as they move along that growth curve. Generally, body weight is going to be based on their current body weight, and we'll have somewhere an expected body weight of what we expect them to mature out at. Growth rate is another way that we use to calculate our requirements because that is a major influence on composition of gain. We talked about last time in the last video that increasing rate of gain usually increases fat deposition as well. So that growth rate can affect the composition of gain. And that affects nutrient requirements. So we want to make sure there's time periods we don't want to push our animals for maximum growth. Female development is a good example of this. Beef heifer development, we don't want to push our beef heifers to gain like our steers do. They have different objectives and different purposes. And so we need to manage them differently from a growth standpoint to make sure that they will actually have different compositions of gain and have a different growth rate because they have different production goals. Nutrients that are really important for growth, when we consider some of the highest stages of production or the highest levels of nutrients required for animals, in general, the nutrient requirements for growing animals is really high compared to the mature animals, except for maybe lactation. But growth is a critical time period in these animals' developments. They require high levels of protein, minerals, energy to be able to accomplish proper development. And so basically what's happening is the smaller animals or the younger animals, they do have the nutrient requirements of an adult, but they have such a smaller GI tract, they simply can't eat as much. So we have to increase the concentration of nutrients in the diet to be able to make sure that our animals are able to grow and develop as needed. And so it's all about having a nutrient-dense, nutrient-packed diet for the growing animals. When we talk about energy requirements, we've got to have adequate energy to support the growth. If there's no energy, they're not going to grow. However, if we push it too far and we get too much energy, we're going to see fat deposition. Too little energy, no growth. And so energy has one of the biggest influences on growth rate. And that's why we tend to worry about solving for energy requirements first, because it's the biggest quantity the animals need, and it has that biggest influence on growth rate. Then we'll worry about protein requirements. And it is very important, especially in the non-ruminants, that we consider the essential and limiting amino acids that are very important for growth. Think pigs and poultry, where we need to make sure we have lysine and some of those other essential amino acids provided in the diet at adequate quantities to promote proper growth. Both young non-ruminants and ruminants need to have high quality protein. We can't just feed them any kind of protein. It's got to be a good quality source. We can't use urea or other non-protein nitrogen sources as well in the young ruminants because their system isn't ready for it. They're not able to handle it, and so we need to make sure we're using good quality protein sources. Once we get that microbial fermentation really developing in the rumen, then we can start considering non-protein nitrogen or lower quality protein sources. However, you've got to wait until microbial fermentation is fully developed and the animals are able to handle a little bit lower quality of protein. And so it's very, very important to pay attention to how they grow and develop. Mineral and vitamin requirements. You got to make sure we have the right amounts for growth. The very young herbivores especially need B vitamins and vitamin K until that microbial fermentation really takes over fully, just because they can rely on the microbes later in life to supply those. But early on, they're not fully, the animal's not able to get all that they need from the microbes, and so it's kind of waiting until that microbial fermentation takes over that we still need to consider sources of some of the B vitamins and vitamin K. That wraps up talking a little bit about the requirements. There'll be a third video that talks about the remaining considerations with growth.